It's easy to forget, I think, as we're hammering away on our instruments, that what we are hearing is the sum of thousands of parts. Everything from our guitar strings, to the speakers, to vacuum tubes, all the way down to resistors, LEDs, op amps, the lot. I'm certainly not thinking about that stuff while I'm playing. The reality, though, is that these components make a massive impact on what we ultimately hear. There can be just a couple of components difference between a tube screamer and a fuzz, a big muff and a fuzz face. So what would happen then if we were to take all of these different components, all of these different variations, and cram them in to one box? Thanks to teaching machines up in Wales, we no longer have to wonder. Before I go any further, this is a sponsored video, Nevermore's first sponsored video. Teaching machines sent me the pedal, no money's changed hands, they haven't seen the video before you have, and all thoughts and opinions in this video are mine. Let's get into it. This is Fuzzbillion. The Fuzzbillion front panel is a little bit intimidating at first, but once you get used to it, it's actually super simple and super easy to use. Effectively, you have these 11 switches here, each one ranging from 0 to 9, each number representing different options relating to that part of the signal chain. Imagine if you had kind of an exposed fuzz pedal where you could reach in and just change components and voltages in and out on the fly, and that's basically what we have here. So with that in mind, switch number 1, I'm going to go through them as quickly as I can. I'm not going to say what all the options are, I'm just going to go through what the switches are. So option number 1 is basically a boost. That's the very start of your signal, the very start of the signal chain, and there's a boost. There's an op amp boost there. Switch number 2 is the drive control. So switch number 2, 3 and 4 all work in tandem, they work together. They're the kind of main fuzz section of the pedal, really, as is at least how I see it. So 2 is the drive knob, effectively. 3 and 4 control positive and negative clipping applied to the signal. So that is the clipping applied to the top of your waveform and to the bottom of your waveform, and they can be different. So if they're the same, you have symmetric clipping. If you have different ones on the top and the bottom of the waveform, you have asymmetrical clipping. You may recognize that from like overdrive pedals and all that sort of stuff. Switch number 5, the circle that we have here, is a tone knob. So the higher the number, the less bass and the more treble you're going to get. Really useful for kind of gently controlling the low end of your fuzz if it starts to get really big and boomy. 6 and 7 control an octave, or an octave circuit, kind of like an octavia style thing. So 6 is the kind of input drive into that kind of octave fuzz circuit there. You've got an input drive and there's the level of the octave, effectively kind of a mix for the octave type effect. Really, really cool. All like octavia kind of Hendrixy sounds in there. Awesome. Number 8 over here is kind of crazy. It's a phase locked loop according to the manual. I have no idea what that means, but it's kind of like having an oscillator track your signal, sort of, and you can get everything from really cool, really glitchy sounds over to like a theremin. It's awesome. I've never seen something like that before. Number 9 is bias offset. So that's where all of those big kind of spitty, sputtery sounds come in. Number 10 is output clipping. So just a last clipping stage. There is a volume impact there when you start adding clipping to the output signal, which is where your volume knob here comes in. So it's like an output gain type thing. If you want to really push the front of the amp, you can do that too with that. Lastly, number 11 there is a low pass filter. So if you've got a big fuzzy sound going on, you're adding tons of clipping from lots of different sources within the circuit and everything, and your high end starts to get a little bit harsh, a little bit abrasive, a little bit out of control, you can tame it with that one there. On the sides of the Fuzzbillion, here and here, we will find instrument and line level switches for both the input and the output, which is super, super useful if you're in the studio, or if you're playing with synths, or you play with lots of different instruments and you're using it at home and you want to be able to flick between things. That is an awesome feature that every pedal should have, and I love it. Everybody else take note. Teaching Machines, killer. Thank you. It is definitely a lot to take in, but you have got a manual on side to give you a hand, and frankly, you can just jump straight in. You don't really need the manual. Once you just start flicking and playing with knobs, you start hitting great tones pretty much immediately, and you're all set. I think the best way to kind of walk you through this pedal is to just start with everything at 0 and dial in some sounds. So let's start there. Okay, so we're all set up with my Strat going into a Mesa Boogie Mark IV clean channel, or Rhythm 1 as it is on the Mark IV. So here's my clean sound. Okay, kick in the Fuzzbillion. So everything on the Fuzzbillion is at 0. That doesn't necessarily mean it's completely off. So all we're going to get at the moment is no boost, no octave, no fancy phase loopy things. What we are going to get is germanium transistors in there on our drive options, just there on 3 and 4. But because there's no drive setting, I'm not expecting it to make a massive amount of difference. We will probably hear quite a bit of top end loss. So let's just kick that in. Quite a bit of top end loss. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave our clipping options the same there, and we're just going to bring up our drive. Let's just bring that up to 4. We're starting to get some fuzz going here. Let's bring that right up. And there you go, nice germanium kind of toppy fuzzy thing. Remember, if we wanted to, we've got various EQ options here to control high and low and all that sort of stuff. What I am going to do is bring that down to, let's say, 5, and I'm just going to bring the boost up to 5. Let's do that. Okay, so it's boosting, but it's boosting in to that drive section, effectively. We'll call it that. We'll call it the drive section. It's boosting into a distortion, so we're not getting louder volume, we're just getting more distortion. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, at the moment, they're both set to what I believe 0 is just a germanium transistor. So if I start changing this, if I change one of them, we're going to get asymmetric clipping, right? Which means we're going to get one type of distortion applied to the top of the signal and another applied to the bottom of the signal in terms of the waveform. If I wanted to bring those up to be the same, and let's say we've got to have a little bit of top end going on. So you can hear that low pass filtering away there. Let's bring those up to, let's try 4. So as we change the types of distortion that we're applying, we're going to see changes in top end and in low end and all that sort of stuff, depending on kind of the type of clipping applied. So we had a lot of top end roll off there. I've just brought that up to 5. Now we can really hear that roll off. If I wanted to add top end, I can play with my tone control down here, the circle, which will reduce the bass and add treble. I'm trying really hard not to play that riff, it's going to be a challenge. Okay, so let's put that back to 5. I'm feeling 5, and let's just go through the rest of our clipping options. Much lower gain there. Bit higher. High still. Okay, let's start playing then. I think I'm just going to put that back to germanium because I actually quite liked the sound that we had before. Let's see what we have now. Okay, let's try that. Okay, all right, so we're nice and fuzzed out now. Okay, so now let's move on to the octaving options. Right, we're going to bring up the octave drive, which is basically pushing signal into that auditive circuit, and then we have our octave mix, so we're going to bring that up. You can actually hear it coming in there, you hear it in the noise. Awesome, let's just bring that up even more. Unhinged sounds happening there. So next up is that phase locked loop that I mentioned earlier. So effectively what we're looking at here is a sort of like an oscillator that tries to kind of follow your sound a little bit. It's really, really cool. It's a really, really cool effect. So let's just have a look at that quickly. It does interact with other areas of the signal path quite a bit, so it can be quite unpredictable, which just makes it even more fun, at least in my opinion. So let's just start off. It's so cool. You can hear it kind of glitching in the background. It's kind of awesome, especially for like leady. Really, really cool. You can get some crazy, crazy things out of that. That kind of number 7 with the theremin thing is just awesome. This is our bias offsets, where we get our kind of spluttery, fuzzy thing start coming in. Yeah, really, really cool, kind of big spluttery. Yeah, awesome, like kind of Velcro-y. Next is the, let's bring that up, our output clip. So actually, I'll tell a lie, I'm gonna put that down to 0. So as you start to introduce that output clipping, there is a big hit in terms of output volume. Compensate for with this output knob here. It gets us back to where we want to be. Does add a nice, thick, beefy layer of distortion. Yeah, sick. And then last, low pass filter right there that I talked about earlier. Let's get some synths out. It really does sound absolutely massive, this thing. Hopefully the kind of depth and breadth of tones available here is starting to show. There's everything from booming to thin and spluttering to smooth, shred to theremin. I don't think anyone's ever said that before. Okay, I have gotten my Game Changer motor synth out off the shelf. I've got a sequence set up, really simple sequence. Here's what that sounds like. And then when we're ready, I'm just going to bring that pedal in and have a tweak. Last, but by no means least, I think we'll get out the Lyra 8. First thing you notice when you take the Fuzzbillion out of the box is that it weighs an absolute ton. Something to bear in mind if it's going on your board, definitely, but I think it's important to remember that it only weighs that much because the build quality of the thing is outstanding. I genuinely believe this thing could double as a hammer in a pinch. It's incredibly well made. It's built like a tank. As I mentioned before, the control scheme does take a little while to wrap your head around with the 11 switches and the symbols and all that sort of stuff. I haven't gone over what each of these numbers kind of is because it is impossible to remember, but it's all written out there in a very, very pretty manual for you if you want to get super, super deep into the nitty-gritty of what this thing can do. If you're a fuzz aficionado, then definitely read the manual because it's all in there. When you do start playing with all of these switches though, and it does start to kind of click in your head. For me, it took about a day and a half. The depth and the tones and the sheer breadth and range of sound on tap here really starts to sink in. It reacts differently to different instruments. It's completely different with a Strat as it is with a Les Paul, as it is obviously with something like a motor synth, as it is with a Lyra, as it is with everything else. Fuzzes are famously sensitive to the impedance that's coming in, and this one is no different. It does a really fantastic job of the octavia thing. There's big muff sounds. Whether you're after Green Day to Gilmore to Snakes of Russia to Smashing Pumpkins, it is all in this box. You just have to kind of learn to use it and get stuck in there and go find it. Teaching Machines have crammed it all in here, and with these line level, instrument level switches on the side, they have made it synth friendly and studio friendly, as well as obviously guitar, bass, and all that sort of stuff to boot, which is just killer. Awesome. I love it. Genuinely. I love it. It's brilliant. It's really, really cool. Thank you so much to Teaching Machines for sending over the Fuzzbillion for me to check out. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Nevermore has a forum, so if you want to get chatty with a bunch of like-minded audio nerds, you can get over there in the link in the description. Sign up to our website. We've got some free plugins coming out super soon. Loads of awesome stuff coming down the pipeline. Really, really excited. So get along for the ride by subscribing, like, share, all the YouTubey crap, and I will see you next time.